of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us your servants, whom you have called to the performance of important trusts in these islands. Father, let your blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. And this we beg in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. And senators, as we are standing, we will have a moment of silence in recognition of the late Honorable Sir John W. D. Swan, KBE, JP. Thank you, senators. Please be seated. Item number 2, 3, confirmation of minutes, and I call on Senator Tanner.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, the 3rd of June, 2026, be taken as read.
Is there any objection to that motion? Yes, Senator Rogers.
I do have a couple of objections to the minutes, mostly around the discussion during the question period as it relates to standing orders discussion. I'd like to note that multiple opposition and independent senators expressed, they expressed that the information that was sought was not necessarily in the public domain in completion. Also,
Yes.
I'd like to note that the president said that she did not say that she would consider establishing a committee. She stated that she would establish a committee. And then finally,
Point of information.
not right now.
Point of order.
Point of order.
The
What's the point
senator
of order?
is misleading the House. The president of the Senate does not have the powers to commission a committee. There must be a motion from the floor for that.
Okay. I'm just responding to what was actually said in the meeting.
Senator. Yeah. Senators, I'm just reminded, but I did rule on
You did.
at the time, and my ruling stands.
Yes, that's fair. I just want the minutes to reflect that independent and opposition senators disputed that the information was in the public domain, and the statement was that she would set up a committee. However, per the information given by the senator, I'm not sure how that'll be reflected in the minutes, but the statement was that she would set up a committee, not consider establishing a committee. And then also I like noted that the senators had a issue
I should ask
with
whether
the,
it's, everybody agrees.
oh, I'm sorry. Basically, that the senators raised concern related to information released to the media shortly before sitting. It undermines the scrutiny function of the question period. That was the basic sentiments that senators made during that period. So those are the three things that I would like added to the meeting, to the minutes.
Your objection is noted, but is there any senator who wants to speak to Senator Tanaka, first of all?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Rogers. My proposal is that we suspend the moving of the minutes to consider proposed amendments. It may be that Senator Fubler is correct. However, if that is the case, the minutes still need to reflect what was actually said and not what the ideal situation would be. So my proposal is that we suspend moving these minutes today to review them and hear any proposed amendments and go forward after that.
Madam AG, Minister Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not in disagreement with the idea of suspending for review on the latter point, which is how the phrasing of the actual language around the committee was. But in relation to the comments on the question period and senators' views about scrutiny of Parliament, you ruled on that.
Yes.
It will not be appropriate to be amended in the minutes to reflect something that the President has ruled on as not appropriate for the floor. That is our position. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam AG, and I think your point is taken. The ruling, sorry. Senator Tannock.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I move that the approval of the minutes, the confirmation of the minutes of Wednesday, 3rd of June, 2026, be, suspended. Deferred until our next meeting for review of any proposed amendments.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The minutes are deferred. Thank you, senators, for your comments. Item number 3, messages.
There are no messages, Madam President.
Item number 4, reports of committee. There are none. Item number 5, announcements. I do want to report that we've had apologies from Vice President John White, who is traveling. And further announcements. The first then is in the name of Senator Lindsay K. Simmons, the Junior Minister of Home Affairs. Senator Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Regulatory Authority of Bermuda 2020-2021 Annual Report. Senators may access copies on their tablets and or the Parliament website. Have another one, Madam President?
Yes, certainly you can do your second.
Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Cost of Living Essential Commodities Amendment Regulation 2026 as made by the Minister responsible for Consumer Affairs and exercise of the power conferred by Section 10E of the Cost of Living Commission Act 1974. Senators may access copies on their tablets and or Parliament website. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons, Junior Minister of Home Affairs. The next announcement is in the name of Senator Lauren F. Bell, the Junior Minister of Economy and Labor. Senator Bell, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, Madam President and colleagues and listening audience. I hereby present for the information of Senate the proposed introduction of cooperative legislation in Bermuda. Senators may access copies on their tablets and or the Parliament website.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Item number 6, notices of motion. The first notice of motion is in the name of the Junior Minister of Tourism, Transport, Culture, and Sport, Senator Misha Fubler. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I hereby present for the consideration of Senate the Tourism Investment Rosewood Bermuda Order 2026, proposed to be made by the Minister responsible for tourism under Section 3 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017, together with the written agreement of the Minister of Finance, and exercise of the power conferred by Section 5 of the Tourism Investment Act 2017. And I give notice that at a later point in the meeting, I will move that the said draft order be approved. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Senator Fubler, Junior Minister of Tourism, Transport, and Culture and Sport. The second notice of motion is also in the name of Senator Misha Fubler, the Junior Minister of Public Works and Environment. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Switching hats, I do hereby present the following motion and give notice that I propose to move the motion at a later point in the meeting. Be it resolved in accordance with Section 2, subsection 1, paragraph A of the Acquisition of Land Act 1970, that this Honorable House approve the purchase of the Compass Point building together with all land apparent to thereto, situate at 9 Bermudiana Road, Pembroke. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Misha Fubler. Item number 7, petitions. There are none. Item number 8, statements. We have one statement this morning, and that is in the name of Senator, the Honorable Crystal C. Caesar, the Minister of Education. Minister Caesar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning to you and the listening public and my fellow senatorial colleagues. Madam President, today I rise to update this Honorable House on the progress being made in advancing the transformation of Bermuda's public school system and to outline the deliberate steps being taken to strengthen delivery, stabilize our schools, and improve outcomes for every child. At the beginning of the current academic year, the Ministry of Education undertook a careful review of the public school system transformation program. Following that review, we adopted a refined approach, one that balances long-term structural reform with the immediate need to ensure stability, clarity, and focus across our schools. Our emphasis has been on strengthening the foundations of the system while continuing to advance transformational change. This includes reducing reliance on acting appointments, supporting school leadership, strengthening teaching and learning, and ensuring that schools improve ensuring that school improvement efforts result in measurable gains in student achievement. This approach recognizes an important reality. Educational transformation is not a single event or destination. Rather, it is an ongoing process of continuous school improvement and system-wide enhancement. Sustainable change must be thoughtfully paced, evidence-based, appropriately resourced, and centered at all times on the needs and success of our students. Madam President, I am pleased to report that meaningful progress continues across several areas which are key in the transformation program. First, work continues to advance the development of signature learning programs at the Berkeley Institute, Cedar Bridge Academy, and Sands Secondary School. These programs will play a central role in reshaping senior school education by creating pathways that better align with student strengths, interests, aspirations, and future career opportunities. The work is being led by each school's leadership team and supported by dedicated teachers who have been actively engaged throughout the transformation journey. I am particularly pleased to note that substantial progress made on the new media center at the Sands Secondary School. This facility will serve as an important resource in supporting the school's signature programs, particularly those focused on hospitality and tourism, and will enhance opportunities for experiential and industry-connected learning. Madam President, the ministry continues to support senior school transformation efforts through targeted investments in staff capacity and program development. Funding has been provided to support teacher overtime to recognize teacher leaders who are championing school-based transformation initiatives. Each senior school submitted detailed proposals identifying priority areas requiring further development during the 2025-26 academic year. This investment reflects our commitment to empowering school leaders and educators to develop sustainable, school-specific models of improvement that meet the unique needs of their students and communities. Secondly, Madam President, at the primary level, implementation of parish school features continues to progress at Francis Patton, Purvis Primary, Harrington Sound, and Elliott Parish Schools. These schools represent far more than the addition of years 7 and 8. They are intended to strengthen learning communities, expand opportunities for students, and create more engaging, supportive, developmentally appropriate learning environments. To support this work, dedicated resources, personnel, and equipment have been allocated to each participating school. I would also like to extend my best wishes to the team of educators from the Purvis Parish Primary School, who will travel to the United Kingdom this summer to visit an established dual language school. This marks the second international professional learning opportunity provided to support Purvis's dual language program. Having recently visited the school, Purvis that is, and met with the educators participating in the study visit, I was encouraged by their enthusiasm, their commitment to strengthening bilingual learning for opportunities for students. The knowledge and experience gained through this engagement will further enhance the program and contribute to the school's featured continued development. Thirdly, Madam President, the ministry continues to advance the development of a reimagined school model for Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy. This important work is being led by a dedicated local educator with subject matter expertise, and it's focused on developing a modern, inclusive, and evidence-based framework to support students with specialized learning needs. To date, this work has produced a robust, research-informed foundation aligned with international best practice, a position paper outlining infrastructure requirements for the school, meaningful engagement with educators, parents, and multidisciplinary professionals, and a collaborative design model that promotes accountability, transparency, and shared ownership. Madam President, alongside the progress outlined today, the ministry has taken responsible decisions to recalibrate certain aspects of the wider transformation program to ensure that implementation remains sustainable, coordinated, and effective. This is not a reduction in ambition, rather it is a strengthening of execution. We are committed to ensuring that changes are thoroughly planned, adequately resourced, and carefully sequenced so that they deliver meaningful and lasting benefits for students, families, and staff. Accordingly, the ministry rescinded previously published timelines relating to future school openings and closures beyond September 2025. This decision reflects our commitment to ensuring that infrastructure planning, educational design, workforce considerations, and operational readiness are fully aligned before additional phases of implementation are undertaken. Put simply, we are choosing thoughtful preparation over rushed implementation. By doing so, we reduce the risk of unintended consequences and increase the likelihood of long-term success. Madam President, it is important to address a common misconception regarding school closures and anticipating cost savings. The closure of a school does not automatically generate significant financial savings. Historically, when schools have closed, educators and staff have been redeployed throughout the Bermuda public school system. As a result, the majority of operating costs, particularly salaries and benefits, remained within the system and are redistributed rather than eliminated. The government has remained committed to retaining educators and supporting continuity within our schools. To date, any staff wishing to remain within the public education system have been accommodated. However, as student enrollment continues to decline, we must acknowledge that this approach may become increasingly difficult to sustain over the long term. These realities must be carefully considered as we continue to plan for the future of public education. Madam President, the work underway demonstrates this government's unwavering commitment not only to achieving the long-term vision of transformation, but also ensuring equity, support, and opportunity for every school, every teacher, and every student today. Transformation is not solely about the future state we seek to achieve. It is equally about strengthening the experiences and outcomes for students currently within our classrooms. In closing, Madam President, progress is being made. It is deliberate. It is thoughtful. It is grounded in evidence. And most importantly, it is centered on the best interests of Bermuda's children. We will continue this work with discipline, transparency, and determination. We will remain focused on delivering meaningful improvements in teaching, learning, and student achievement, while building a public education system that prepares every child to succeed in Bermuda and beyond. The transformation of public education remains a priority for this government, and we remain steadfast in our commitment to seeing that work through. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Minister Crystal Caesar, Minister of Education. Moving on with our orders. Item number 9, introduction of bills. There are none. Item number 10, the first reading of public bills. The following public bills have been received from the Honorable House of Assembly and are now being read for the first time. Their titles are the Retail Shops Temporary Custom Duty Relief of Capital for Capital Investment Amendment Act 2026, Payroll Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2026, and the Electricity Amendment Act 2026. And Senators, these bills will be taken up on our orders of the day. Item number 11, first reading of private bills. There are none. Item number 12, question period. Senators, we will now entertain questions related to the statement that has been delivered by the Minister of Education. Would any senator care to ask a question? Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning, colleagues and the listening audience. And I'd like to thank the Minister for that timely update on the public school transformation programme. I have a few questions. Firstly, I will start at the top and go down. So I'll start with the signature learning programmes, and the statement discussed the continued advancement of the development of these programmes. My first question is, how many learning partners are there on board at each of the schools for each of the signature programmes? And I guess, because I'm probably not going to get a number, what is the percentage? Are they 50% there? Are they 20% there? What kind of percentage are there to actually finalising the development of these programmes?
Thank you. Was that your only question? Minister, do you want to address the question, or you want?
I thought that there were going to be the
There will be
others
more.
because you did say you were starting
yeah.
at the top. So did you want to go through the remainder?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Then that's fine.
So I'll have a supplementary to that. In that, we've currently seeing the first year S4s graduating imminently from the first year of these signature learning programs. How is their learning being impacted by the ongoing development of these programs? And second supplementary is for those students not in the signature learning program, has there been any change to their academic progress or academic syllabus? And then as I started with public, my second question is, can the Minister state whether government remains committed to the two-tier system or whether alternative models are being considered? And my third question, mainly around the primaries because they have the most number, but what major infrastructure projects do we anticipate over the summer within the primary education system specifically, but across all, and how are they anticipated to impact or better the learning outcomes that we're expecting for our children? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham.
Okay, thank you, Madam President, and thank you to my colleague for the questions. The signature learning programs, I believe the question was specifically around how many learning partners there are at each school. To explain the question, and so no, you will, Madam President, there is no specific number that I can give at this time because I wasn't anticipating to have a specific number. However, I can indicate that there are, with the several signature learning programs in each of the schools, we have several learning partners who are assisting with things such as what used to be called day release or work experiences, experiential learning, both at their locations and or at schools in collaboration with the schools developing the curricula, helping students to have a more hands-on and experiential learning experience. So I can go away and get specific numbers and give that to my colleague, but as it stands right now, that number I do not have at hand. And in terms of what percentage of the signature learning programs have been completed, that is a difficult question because, as I indicated in my statement, that transformation is ongoing. And as schools continue to develop their signature learning programs, there will be additional portions, pieces that they either adopt or maybe move on differently in terms of how they understand and find that it is either effective or not. And so there are several schools, to be clear, Sands Secondary School, because it does have a middle school on property, but specifically speaking about the signature learning programs at Sands Secondary School, they continue to evolve and adapt and it is in the public domain, each of the different signature programs as well, because this is still, we are in the midst of transformation. Sands Secondary School, because it is a newer secondary school, I would say it's still a bit more fledgling than other signature schools in terms of where it is as to how far developed their signature program is. The others have had a bit more time, as my colleague did indicate. There are students who are graduating this year and who were the first cohort of signature learning programs. And the question was, how has this learning impacted, how has this signature learning program impacted their learning? And I think it needs to be understood what signature learning programs and courses are meant to do. It's meant to provide students with a broader based exposure to areas of interest, particularly at this stage in their life. As we all know, we continue to learn and grow. So students have chosen areas of signature learning that they are interested in. Many of them have graduated with micro-credentials and or exposure to careers that they either may or may not continue. And so it has affected their learning by giving them more experiential learning experiences so that now that they can make a better decision when they do ultimately decide the areas of study that they either will pursue or areas of work that, who knows, some of them may enter. Has there been any change to their academic syllabus? And I think, again, this is in the public domain as it pertains to what's signature learning programs, how this will be impacted. So the changes to the syllabus was that there was a particular portion of credits that students had to earn in their specific signature, if that is what they chose, and they have a particular level of credits in which they had to pursue that in order to graduate. So yes, it did actually change the syllabus based on their area of interest and what signature they pursued. So yes, there was change because they had to have exposure to those areas. The second question was not actually contemplated within this statement. This was more on, and that question was with regard to commitment to a two-tier system or whether others are being contemplated. I did not specifically speak to the tiers of education as it stands right now. That is still for consideration, and so that question actually falls outside of this particular statement. And the third question was around what works are being contemplated over the summer. And I do have to explain that, as we all know, a lot of our buildings are aging, and there are several works in several buildings that need to be addressed, from polishing of floors to replacement of windows to installation of blinds to painting. There's a myriad of items that need to be addressed in our schools, and we are doing so in earnest. Every May, there is a walkthrough that is done to ensure that we have a fresh list of items that may be more acute, others that may be long-standing, and there again we have that list, and we definitely are going to be pursuing that fulsomely and as comprehensively as possible over the summer. And I believe that answers the majority of questions asked.
Thank you. I believe Senator Tawana Tannock has questions for you, Minister.
Yes, thank
Senator
you, Madam
Tannock.
President, and thank you for your presentation, Minister. So when I read this update, transformation program update, I don't see any measurable achievements. I hear progress has been made, but I don't see any way that we've been given to measure that progress. So I guess my three questions will focus on measurable matrices. So I note that it states that each senior school submitted detailed proposals identifying priority areas requiring further development during the 2025-2026 academic year. Can the minister please let us know how far each of those proposals have gone with completion of the areas identified? So for instance, if Cedar Bridge submitted a proposal and had 12 points, how many of those have been actively worked on and have been achieved and completed or are still in progress? My second question is regarding the transformational teams, the school transformational teams. How many, actually it's about transformation in general, I suppose. So I'll leave that one alone. I note that the minister stated that the timeline had been rescinded because the ministry is looking at not rushing, but rather delivering results. Do we have a new timeline? If so, where can the public find it? If not, when can we expect to receive one? And then my third question is, I note that Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy is having work led by a dedicated local educator. Can you please let us know who that dedicated local educator is and what the timeline for having that up and running is? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tannock.
Thank you, Madam President. With regard to specific measures in this particular statement, as it pertains to progress that is being made, I think my statement did make it clear that transformation is an ongoing process, and progress will be continuous throughout school years, from year to year, as we are transforming children's lives. It is not an end goal, nor is it a specific deadline. I did hear Senator Tannock speak about specifics as it pertains to the priorities for certain senior schools and what they were working on for this particular year. Again, that is a very specific question in terms of percentages. Again, that is something that I would need time to collaborate and garner from my technical team. I do not have that at my fingertips, but again, that it can be garnered, and that is something that we can look to provide once I have gotten that specific information. The second question was with regard to a new timeline around infrastructure closures and or openings. And I have to be clear that when I speak with regard to school closures and or openings, there is quite a bit of review and consideration that has to be undertaken. And one being school enrollment, the age of a building, also what will be happening in that building. We also have to be future looking, what do we want our schools to look like, what types of infrastructure changes may or may not need to be contemplated. And so announcing a specific timeline will is forthcoming. I'm hesitant to do so at this particular time because I believe that I will be preempting the work that my team is doing. And so until such time as that we have a more fulsome understanding of the 24 buildings that we have to look at, the future state of enrollment, looking at how we may want our schools to be apportioned going forward. This is a huge undertaking, and it is not something that can be done, as I stated, in a rushed fashion. We need to do it and make sure it's being done deliberately and thoughtfully. And but I will commit, as I have in the past, that any future closings of any schools, we will give that school at least a full year in order for them to prepare for that school closing. And I think that that is fair because it does give the school communities an opportunity to prepare for that closing, and for the community, parents, etc., to make decisions around what they'd like to do if and when a school closes. And so announcements will be forthcoming when it is appropriate to do so. I will not be making any pronouncements here today. As I said, it will be preempting the work that the technical teams are doing, and I do not believe that is fair to them. With regard to the individual who is leading the reimagining of Dame Marjorie Bean, her name is Clendell Lowe. I did mention Ms. Lowe in my statement when we contemplated the budget earlier this year. We talked about the work that the team is doing there, or has done, or continues to do. I did outline the specifics around the Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy. And again, as one would know, if they have visited or had an opportunity to see the building, the facility, the program has outgrown that building. And so we also need to ensure that any planning that we do is fulsome and thoughtful, particularly for the population that we have. That group is informed by there are at least 35 people who volunteered for different work streams under the Dame Marjorie Bean Hope Academy. There are specific work areas they will be contemplating. Infrastructure is one, but also programming is another. And so that continues because this is a fulsome project. We know that that population is requires very sensitive planning, very careful human resources wrapped around. And so to do it without a fulsome review, again, would be doing them a disservice. However, they are doing quite a bit of work. They are about to provide their some specific updates to myself. And when I have that information, and I believe that it is available, I can bring it for my colleagues to understand where they are. But the work continues in earnest. They are looking at modern day technology, 21st century spaces for that population in terms of human resources, and also the equipment and or tools in order to provide education for that population. So I do hope that I've given some idea of the in-depth work that Ms. Lowe is leading with that team.
Thank you, Minister. Would any other senator care to ask questions? Or Senator Tannock, you have a...
Yeah, I
an
just have a
additional question.
follow-up. Thank you, Minister, for that explanation. So is there anywhere where we could find how much progress has been made on the priority areas identified by each senior school?
Thank you, Madam President. At this particular stage, it's not a public document. This is contemplated within each school building and led by the leaders and school transformation teams. When they have had an opportunity to collate that information and are ready to publish it, obviously it will be made available publicly. But again, this is still being contemplated within the school buildings, within the school transformation teams.
Thank you, Minister. I believe, Senator Rogers, I believe you have questions of the Minister.
Good morning, listening
have the
public.
floor.
This is David Rogers. So, like the presentation, thought it was very interesting and informative. The phrasing "thoughtfully paced" sort of stuck in my craw a bit, as the opposition or anyone, I don't think, has ever accused the government of moving swiftly to address the education emergency. I do like the ideas of signature schools, however. I'm interested in learning more about how kids will be streamed into their future occupation at the age of 12. What does that process look like? I have heard good things about the parish-based support for schools, and I'm especially interested in learning about the dual language program. What language is that in? If you could tell me a little bit more about that program, I'd definitely be interested in hearing about it and may want to visit it myself. I'm very interested in, I think that's a missed opportunity. We have a large native Portuguese, well, we have a large Portuguese speaking population, so it would be definitely interested in, I know when we were looking for a school for our child, we were looking for some type of language immersion. So this is very good news to hear. There was definitely a glossing over the right sizing that would probably need to be had in the ministry. I don't think that it makes much sense. At least it's counterintuitive to think that closing schools and right sizing staffing would make changes to your budget. But ignoring that, if 9 years ago we did not expect education to look the way it does now, 4 years from now, what does the minister expect the school system to look like? And what are the four major steps to get where she envisions the school system to look like?
Thank you, Senator Rogers.
Thank you, Madam President. I will say that I do take issue with using the term emergency in education. I think we need to be very careful when we're using language around our students. We have to not continue to say that.
Point of information, the phrase emergency came from a parent that I canvassed last week.
Thank you, Madam President. And whilst I appreciate that parents specifically may have emergencies, to say that the entire system is an emergency, I think is unfair, particularly to the hard work that many of the teachers, principals, and school leaders do every day. I believe that if there are emergencies.
Point of information.
Senator
The
Rogers.
phrase was also used by many teachers operating in the.
Senator Rogers, the minister was speaking.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think you're out of order to
My
interrupt
apologies.
her response. Minister, please carry on.
Thank you, Madam President. Whilst I understand, as I was explaining, that there particularly may be specific issues that parents, teachers have issues with, there is a process in place in order for us to address any concerns that parents have. It's the school teacher, it is the school leadership, it is the department, and then ultimately to myself. And so, again, I think we need to be very careful when we're saying there's an emergency in education. Again, it does not bode well for those who continue to show up day after day and deliver very good support, work, and education and pedagogy to students. The question with regard to how we are handling a student being streamed into an occupation at age 12 is a bit of a misnomer, and I guess I should explain how signatures are chosen, and that is exactly what it is. It is a choice. Children are introduced to varying different career opportunities that each of the senior schools provide. If there is a specific profession that a student, say for instance, they decide they want to do, I don't know, mechanical engineering, and so they are geared and exposed to that, to a variety at first, and then they make a choice when they get into year 9 as to what signature they ultimately want to choose. But if they begin that program and recognize that, you know what, this might not be quite for me, there is a stage along that journey in which they can pivot to an alternate signature and or enter a general track. So we are not pigeonholing students into an occupation. I want to be very clear about that. This is exposure to areas of interest which they may or may not ultimately pursue if they do pursue that signature ultimately. The dual language program is at Purvis parish school, and the second language that is being pursued there is Spanish, which one would know if they did take Spanish. I did not, admittedly. Is very close, is a very close cousin to the Portuguese language as well. So I do believe that it is a good choice, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other schools who may at some point decide that they would like to adopt this model. As I mentioned in my statement, there are teachers who will be attending a dual language program in the UK, and they also will be able to glean additional information, not only for Purvis School, but how other schools, if that is a feature that they would like to adopt, how we can do it in a more measured and informed fashion, also based on some of the experiences that they have had themselves. In terms of right sizing of education, I'm not sure that I used that terminology. I did speak, however, to the misnomer publicly that some have said, and I did not speak about any particular group, organization, facet of the public. I did say that it is, however, generally spoken of in terms of having cost savings around whether when a school closes or not. It should be noted that, again, as I did mention, that any school that has closed, any educator who wanted to continue, or any staff member who wanted to continue within the Department of Education, has had the opportunity to do so. That is what I did state, is that we were ensuring that we were not disadvantaging anyone from continuing serving in the Bermuda public school system, if that is what they so chose. A future state is such that we all know that the population is not increasing, it is decreasing year over year. And as we note that enrollments are starting to decrease, we will have to consider, if schools close, if we still will be able to absorb everyone who may have been serving in that school capacity. So it's just being thoughtful and understanding the landscape of where we are currently and where we would like to go. And finally, in terms of where I would like or what I'd like to see in the Bermuda school system in 4 years' time, I would like to ensure that what we are doing is grounded in high quality teaching and learning, so that the outcomes that we have for our students are high. We have great standards, that we have young people who are confident. We have young people who are able to enter careers in a variety of different professions, those of interest. I want to ensure that the quality of what we are doing is of a high standard. And that is not to say that we do not have some very bright young people who are high achieving. I think in a few weeks' time, I will be coming back and be able to speak to some of those young people who have been successful through scholarships. And I believe my colleague, Senator Cunningham, has had exposure to quite a few of those young people as well. And so, again, this is not to say that we don't do this currently, but I want to ensure that we have a tight ship, and we're ensuring that the quality of education gets the right outcomes for our students. So that's what I see in the future.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have a potentially quick supplemental to the dual language, which I found interesting. I don't know that I've heard of this before, but given the released Cambridge results that showed many of our primary schools below the international average, especially for English, I just wondered what led to the decision to establish a dual language school in the first place, and whether, whether learning in English and Spanish is expected to increase English. I'm interested to see what the research shows, if it's evidence-based. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. That is an interesting question. So the dual language program was chosen through school and community collaboration as to what features. Each school has an opportunity when they are going through transition to determine what features it is that they would like to highlight. And this was a community collaborative decision around what that particular school wanted to pursue. And whilst this particular statement doesn't necessarily speak to the Cambridge results, I do understand the maybe thinking around, well, if we're doing dual languages, does this mean that another language will suffer? In fact, it's quite the opposite from what I've been made to understand from educators, is that the earlier that young people have a second, maybe even third language introduced, actually they tend to do better. They have better outcomes at the other end of their educational journey. It actually gives them better opportunities. I think we would all know, because I think most of us are probably native English speakers, not bilingual or multilingual. And I think we all, as adults, probably recognize that having had a second language may have given us additional opportunities. And so I actually believe that this is a very positive for the school and the community and for these young people. In fact, I was just there yesterday, so if I could just diverge very slightly, is that I was able to see these young people engaging in this dual language program and to hear the teacher giving instructions and students responding in Spanish. I had no idea what she was saying until they started doing it, but it actually shows that young people are sponges, and this is only going to help with the outcomes that we ultimately want to see throughout their educational journey.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, Senator Tannock, you have a follow-up question.
Yes, this is actually a supplemental question to a response that the minister gave in response to Senator Rogers, and it's really for my own clarity, and I suppose I should know this. This goes back to the signature schools and Senator Rogers' statement that children had to decide pretty early on, and then I think the minister responded to say it's comprehensive; they can select subjects. So I should probably know more, but Minister, so is it that students, when they graduate from high school, they still get a general Bermuda Secondary School certificate, or they get a general Cambridge certificate, and then they have something that shows that they completed a specialty course, or does it show that they completed high school with a course in hospitality or tourism? How does that work? Thanks.
Minister.
Thank you. Oh, is it on? Oh. Yes. Okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure it was on. Thank you, Madam President. And this is a good opportunity to educate my fellow senators on what it is that students who are in the signature learning programs will be able to do and pursue. And so to answer her question, all of the above. So students have an opportunity to have to earn micro-credentials in a specific area of learning if that particular area or that signature has such a program. So say, for instance, it is, you can get a certificate in, let's just say, AI generation, and that is a part of their course, and they've been able to pursue that. They can graduate with that. There are also overall graduation requirements that each student has to achieve, be it through a learning program or a signature learning program or a general track. So it's not children have either chosen a signature program, and there are specific credits and requirements under that track, or there is a general track, but both are comparable in terms of what one graduates with. In addition, students also are able to pursue GCSEs, English, math, science, and other courses if they so choose. So there are several opportunities. There is a minimum students have to meet in order to graduate from the Bermuda public school system, and which includes a general track credit bearing requirement, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't say and, or a credit bearing track for signature learning as well. So that's the basic minimum, but they can graduate with so much more.
Thank you, Minister. And before we leave the subject, I just want to make sure that there are no other questions from any senators. If not, thank you, Minister Caesar, Minister of Education, and thank you all senators who asked the questions. We will now move on to item number 13, which is the orders of the day. And the first order of the day is the second reading of the Retail Shops Temporary Custom Duty Relief for Capital Investment Amendment Act 2026, and that is in the name of Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar, the spokesperson for finance. Minister, when you're ready, you can.
Thank you, Madam President. Just get myself sorted here.
Get your bill.
Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that the Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the bill entitled Retail Shops Temporary Customs Duty Relief for Capital Investments Amendment Act 2026.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you. Madam President, honorable members, okay. Sorry, Madam President, bear with me.
Do you know the name of this gentleman?
Okay. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled Retail Shops Temporary Customs Duty Relief for Capital Investments Amendment Act 2026 be now read for the second time. Thank you, Madam President. Honorable members are requested to now give consideration to the bill entitled the Retail Shops Temporary Customs Duty Relief for Capital Investments Amendment Act 2026. The bill proposes to amend the Retail Shops Temporary Customs Duty Relief for Capital Investments Act 2008 to approve an additional 5-year period of duty relief in respect of capital goods for use in capital investment schemes for retail shops. Madam President, honorable members will recall that the period of customs duty relief for retail shops was last extended for a period of 5 years effective 1st of April 2021. The period of duty relief expired on the 31st of March 2026. Madam President, honorable members will appreciate the importance of the government's ongoing commitment to supporting Bermuda's retail sector. I am pleased to inform this honorable House that since the introduction of this relief in April of 2008, Bermuda's retail sector has benefited by claiming and receiving $6.9 million in duty relief in respect of $29.4 million worth of goods imported for the renovation and refurbishment of their shops. Madam President, giving a further 5 years of duty relief encourages further refurbishment and modernization and provides investor certainty. By providing a 0% duty rate on capital goods, the government lowers the barrier for retailers to upgrade their physical stores and technological infrastructure. It also furnishes a predictable fiscal environment, allowing businesses to plan and execute large-scale renovation or expansion projects that may require several years to complete. Moreover, capital development relief encourages job creation. Capital investment projects, such as shop fitting and construction, directly create demand for local labor and services, thereby contributing to the local economy. Madam President, perhaps most importantly, this bill will enhance competitiveness in the face of the steady growth of global e-commerce. Honorable members will be aware that the islanders enjoy shopping online, and as a direct consequence, Bermuda's retailers face robust competition from a myriad of e-tailers. Online sales currently make up over 21% of all retail transactions, with that number expected to approach a quarter of all global retail sales during the next few years. Our local retailers must contend with high operating costs compared to international online platforms. Maintaining relief on capital investments will help local shops reduce their overheads, allowing them to compete more effectively on both price and shopping experience. Madam President, the measures of the bill form part of the government's continuing commitment to supporting Bermuda's retail sector. Over the next 5 years, this duty concession will be of significant benefit to local brick and mortar shops and, by extension, the general economy of Bermuda. Madam President, this government intends for the extended period of the duty concession for retail shops to have been deemed to have come into force on 1st of April to provide for uninterrupted retail shops duty relief for a full 5-year period through 31st of March 2031. I will comment further during any questions that are received. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister. And Senators, before I open the floor for somebody to ask questions, I would just like to acknowledge the presence of the Assistant Collector of Customs.
I think your mic.
Would any senator care to speak on this?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the Minister for her brief. The opposition is pleased to support this bill. I think it's obviously a programme that has been long-running, but one that we have always supported. We note our retail business and small business, for that matter, are under real pressure as they compete with, I've never heard of e-tail, but I thought that was, we'll go with e-tail and online retail. And obviously, Bermudians going abroad, overseas shopping. But I think this obviously not only gives that reduction to our retailers, but also, as mentioned, gives a bit of a boost to the economy for those actually doing the construction, supplying, whatever it is. And also glad to see that it's being continued so there's no gap from April 1st. I do have a question about whether the ministry might commit to a midterm review. So say, 30 months in or something, what types of businesses are benefiting? Are they reaching the smaller independent retails that, I think this bill aims to serve rather than just the larger stores that we see? And a second question is whether the ministry or minister can confirm whether the definition of eligible capital goods has been renewed or reviewed recently, and whether it captures modern retail needs, so point of sale systems, e-commerce, infrastructure that might be needed, energy efficiency upgrades, or whether it remains focused on the more traditional shop fitting and construction materials. But I think ultimately this is the practical targeted relief, that support for the retail sector that we're looking for. We would simply add our voice to the call for government to ease the cost of doing business further, potentially looking at duty payment timings to align with the cash flow realities of some of our smaller retails. But in general, we support the bill. Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to reiterate our support for the bill. So we've heard that the government has foregone about 6.9 million, if I got that correct. How does that compare to the number of refits? Does the ministry have any data on the number of companies that have refitted, number of shops, what they bought? Just general information to sort of understand how companies are benefiting from this program.
Okay, Madam President, I have conferred with the technical team, and do have answers to some of the questions with regard to this, and happy to hear that it's supportive. I think we all would agree that the support is vital for the brick and mortar stores, and I am one of those that, although if I absolutely have to, I will shop online, but I like to look, touch, and feel. So I actually prefer to go into, a storefront, try on, and have a look, and then have them tell me how good I look in it, etc. When you're online, you don't have anybody doing that. But I think this is a good. It's great because I think everything has cycles. I do believe that online shopping is here to stay, but I also believe that brick and mortar still has a place in our economy, and so I believe that. And by extension, it does assist with those construction companies that may be assisting with any additional changes that these stores are looking to make to update their facilities. So with regard to the first question around mid-year review, we actually are producing some full statistics on which can be reported out later on. So again, very specific type questions which aren't always anticipated, so we don't have that at hand, but there are full statistics being gathered, and that can be reported on at a later time. With regard to the definition of eligible capital goods, the current definition is deemed to be significantly broad, that it will contemplate modern day type definitions. So at this time, it has not been considered for review. And the number of companies that have applied for retrofitting, et cetera, well, because we are now, what is this, June, and it's expired as at April 1st, 2026, there was 22, but obviously further detail can be provided in due course. But I'm assuming that and hoping and encouraging, brick and mortar stores to take advantage of this, so that they can remain current and get that foot traffic to come into the store, draw them in, so that they can have the experiences that I spoke about that I actually prefer when I am doing my shopping. So I believe that I've answered all of the questions, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. With that, I move that the bill entitled, sorry, it's a long one, Retail Shops Temporary Customs Duty Relief for Capital Investments Amendment Act 2026 be now read for the second time. Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill. Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill entitled Retail Shops Temporary Customs Duty Relief Capital Investments Amendment Act 2026 be now read for the third time. Thank you, Madam President. And Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass. Madam President, your mic's not on. Your microphone.
Oh, didn't realize it was
You were
off.
really
Thank
low. Yeah, thank you.
We will now move on to the second item on our orders of the day, and that is the second reading of the Payroll Tax Amendment Number 2, Act 2026, and that is in the name of Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar as well, again, spokesperson for Finance. Minister, when you're ready, you can present your second bill.
Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that the Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the bill. I'm sorry, excuse me, Madam President. Hold on one second. Of the bill entitled the Payroll Tax Amendment Act Number 2, 2026 be now read for the second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill entitled Payroll Tax Amendment Act Number 2, 2026 be now read for the second time.
Is there any objection to the second reading? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, the bill before this honorable House is the Payroll Tax Amendment Number 2, Bill 2026, which establishes a simplified payroll tax structure for ride-sharing permit holders. Madam President, the introduction of ride-sharing services under the Motor Car Ride-Sharing Amendment Act 2026 represents a significant modernization of Bermuda's transportation sector. As part of this reform, it is essential that the payroll tax system applicable to ride-sharing permit holders is clear, fair, and administratively efficient. Madam President, ride-sharing operators are individual service providers whose income is derived from providing ride-sharing services directly to passengers through approved dispatching platforms. It would therefore be administratively burdensome to require these individuals to register as employers or self-employed persons, file quarterly payroll tax returns, or calculate tax based on standard payroll tax bands. This bill establishes a flat annual payroll tax of $400 payable by the ride-sharing permit holder. This fixed amount replaces all employer and payroll tax obligations related to ride-sharing remuneration. The payment must be made before a ride-sharing permit is issued, ensuring clarity and certainty for both the permit holder and the government. Madam President, this approach aligns with the government's commitment to creating a modern, accessible, and equitable regulatory framework for ride-sharing. It ensures that ride-sharing permit holders contribute fairly to the tax system while avoiding unnecessary administrative burdens. The transitional provision ensures that persons who received a ride-sharing permit immediately before the commencement date of this act will have a grace period until July 31st to make the required payment, avoiding any disruption to the launch of the ride-sharing service. Madam President, this bill supports the broader transportation reform initiative and ensures that the payroll tax system is appropriately aligned with the new ride-sharing industry. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Tariq Dunbar-Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning to my Senate colleagues and listening audience. I just have one question, but just something to say. Firstly, let me declare my interest as a taxi operator. To be clear from the onset, of course, I was not in favor of rides sharing, and the reason was very straightforward. I think was for taxi drivers, the fairness of the operators. Taxi drivers, like I said, were very heavily regulated, and we have licensing obligations. This bill is an important step, Madam President, and it makes it clear, and I can appreciate the fact that the government said if you don't pay for your payroll tax, there'll be no permit. If no permit, you can't operate. So I can get behind that. But fairness, I do not see. And I said previously, when speaking on this about heavyweight boxing, a heavyweight fighter versus a lightweight fighter doesn't kind of work. I see in the legislation it says that the rideshare operators will be allowed to opt out after 6 months. I guess my question to the minister is, why is it that taxi operators and other public service vehicle operators are required to commit for a full year, whereas the rideshare operators can opt out after 6 months and get a return on their payroll tax, I guess, of $200? Taxi operators can opt in and out. I mean, are they allowed to just test? And I guess if my business doesn't work, the government is giving them I guess, a fail-safe to get back that $200. So that would be my only question to the minister. Can she explain why they are given this 6-month option where taxi operators and others are not allowed for this 6-month option? Thank you, Madam President and Minister, for your answer.
Thank you, Senator Dunbar-Smith. Would any other senator care to ask a question? Senator Tawana Tannock, you have the floor, only because you've put your hand up first.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. My question is, why are rideshare operators being asked to pay less payroll tax than taxi drivers who have put out a greater outlay to support this business? They have greater standards to uphold, and yet we are asking people who have not put the same amount of time and investment into their business to pay less for payroll tax. I think that that is patently unfair to taxi drivers, and I'm steadfast against it.
Thank you, Senator Tannock. And Senator Cunningham, you did indicate you wanted to speak on the bill. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm also talking about the $400 flat rate that is obviously being added to the payroll tax rates. But I just wanted to see if the ministry could confirm whether there was a mechanism to review and adjust that rate over time. Obviously, we don't know how that industry, if you will call it that, will mature, but whether that $400 figure could change in the future.
Thank you, Senator Senator Cunningham. Senator Tannock, you have a second question or comment?
Yes, I do, and it's just to the point of administrative burden. When we talk about administrative burden, and that's why there's this flat rate, which I can appreciate, and I know that taxi drivers do benefit from a flat rate, but what could be more administratively burdensome than having people come back after however many months to say, I didn't like it, I want my money back? I mean, to me, that's creating chaos. So I would like to know why the decision was made when it's not offered to minibus drivers, it's not offered to taxi drivers to offer this type of provision. And how will that ease the administrative burden?
Madam President, just for yourself and my fellow colleagues in the listening audience, I'm being supported remotely, and there is a 14-second delay, so I am awaiting the response from technical officers on the questions that have been posed.
Thank you, Minister. Yes, we understand you are awaiting the response from the technical officers. So, Madam AG, Minister.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning,
Good morning,
to
Minister of
the
Justice.
listening public. I think this is my first time speaking this morning. I have been listening, and while my colleague is waiting for technical officers, we should understand that this is coming as a finance bill
Yes.
in relation to the payroll tax. The questions being asked about from some of the Senate colleagues this morning seem to relate to the policy around rideshare itself, which are not appropriate for the junior minister, the minister speaking for finance, because she's here obviously representing the payroll tax. So, Madam President, I am not certain if maybe Senator Tannock might not have been in the chamber when the legislation was debated, and there was a clear understanding that.
Point of order. Both questions were specific about the $400 tax. I don't believe.
Senator
I
Rogers.
believe the honorable minister is misleading the House.
With respect,
With
you haven't listened to what I've had to say, so you can't determine if I'm misleading the House or not. I am saying that the question asked by Senator Tannock may have been because she wasn't in the House in this chamber when the policy was debated, because I know that Senator Tannock is very astute and she remembers things that she has heard. So it may be possible that she missed the point that rideshare is seasonal. Clearly, that's the reason that it has a prorated fee and the opportunity for people to opt out. It has started as there's an open period for people to sign up. We understand that this is meant to be ancillary, and so we covered the regulations as being seasonal. I just wanted to be sure that members didn't miss that point, because the comments seem to be odd, understanding that it's meant to be seasonal work. Why would we be comparing it with taxi drivers who drive all year when rideshare operators can only operate during the season?
There are several senators who wanted to speak. So we'll start first of all with Senator Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. I will just give a little background on my employment history in international business, where June 1st is historically the start of hurricane season, and companies in Florida will pay for an annual premium for their hurricane insurance, which generally speaking will only come into effect in hurricane season, which is between the 1st of June and the 30th of November. They do not get a discount for 50% because hurricane season is only for 6 months of the year. So I think I would like to know that so a rideshare driver can pay upfront payroll tax and then at the end of the season can get the rest back. Then that suggests to me that is a $200 a year payroll tax rather than a $400 if it's just seasonality.
Minister Wilkerson, you no. I think Senator Cunningham has spoken for the others. Yes. Senator Tannock, you have the floor.
Madam President, sorry. I think I will. Clearly there's a math problem going on across the aisle, right? If you're getting half your money back because you only operated for half the time, I'm not sure how you make the assumption that you've had a full ride and you pay half the amount.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Tannock, did you want to make? You have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam President, and I wanted to thank the AG for her acknowledgement of my astuteness, which I too agree with. But I think when it comes to the seasonal aspect of the ride share, I was in the debate and I vehemently opposed it, but I think one of the issues that I had or raised was, don't quote me on this, but was the fact that the permit could be extended beyond the season based on demand. So we had it where there is no actual capped seasonal requirement for them to only operate.
Madam President,
Minister. Madam AG, yes.
the piece of legislation in front of us is in relation to payroll tax, not the permit, not the regulations.
Point taken. Thank you. We'll wait for the Minister to respond. Minister Caesar.
Thank you, Madam President. It appears that the technical officers agree with the AG. These do not appear to be payroll tax specific questions. And if there are payroll tax specific questions on this piece of legislation, I would be happy to entertain them. But this is more on policy around ride sharing rather than the actual tax that is being contemplated on ride sharing at this time. And as you have indicated, if there are any additional questions, and I believe there aren't any more, Madam President, I believe that ends the substantive debate specifically on the payroll tax around being contemplated for ride-sharing vehicles.
Therefore, Minister, it leaves you to pass your bill.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Payroll Tax Amendment Number 2, 2026 Act be read for the second time.
Is there any objection to the second reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Payroll Tax Amendment Act Number 2, Act 2026 be now read a third time.
Is there an objection to the third reading? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled Payroll Tax Amendment Number 2, Act 2026 do not pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. Thank you, Minister Crystal Caesar, spokesperson for Finance, and thank you to all senators. We'll now move on to our third item, the orders of the day, and that is the second reading of the Electricity Amendment Act 2026, and this is in the name of Senator Lindsey K. Simmons, the Junior Minister for Home Affairs. Senator Simmons, you can present your bill when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that the Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the bill entitled Electricity Amendment Act 2026.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled Electricity Amendment Act 2026 be now read a second time.
Is there any objection to the second reading? No objection.
Madam President, I am pleased to present this bill entitled the Electricity Amendment Act 2026 for consideration of this honorable House. This bill amends the Electricity Act 2016 to strengthen Bermuda's energy planning framework, to provide a statutory process for the suspension of reconstitution of the integrated resource plan process where the public interest requires it, and to make consumer affordability protections and express requirements of the integrated resource plan. Madam President, electricity is woven into Bermudian life. It keeps the lights on for seniors in Somerset, the refrigerator running for families in Pembroke, and the doors open for small businesses in St. George's. When the cost of power rises, the increase impacts what can go on the kitchen table, in the corner shop, and in the monthly budget of every household on the island. This government was elected in 2025 on a mandate of equality and tangible progress. The price and the reliability and the fairness of electricity sits at the center of that mandate. Madam President, the world has reminded us repeatedly and most recently what energy insecurities cost. The war in Ukraine drove global fuel prices to historic highs and pushed households across the world into an energy crisis. Attacks on commercial shipping in the Red Sea disrupted the routes on which trade fuel depends. Tensions in Middle East move oil markets within hours. Bermuda imports virtually every drop of fuel we burn to generate electricity. Each of these shocks crosses the oceans and arrive. Though the fuel adjustment on every bill in Bermudian homes. We lived this in 2022 and 2023, when global fuel drove electricity costs sharply upwards and our families carried the burden. For an island of 21 square miles, more than 600 miles from the nearest coastline, energy security is national security. Madam President, the countries that get their energy transition rate gain far more than cleaner power. They stabilize rates and give households and businesses the certainty to plan and to invest. They build local skills, attract capital, and harden their grids against storms that grow stronger each season. They convert vulnerability into resilience and dependence into self-determination. That is the prize to be won through deliberate planning conducted in the public interest under democratic accountability. Madam President, the IRP, commonly referred is the Integrated Resource Plan, commonly referred to as the IRP, is the principal tool used to guide Bermuda's electricity future. It informs decisions on generations, renewable energy, system reliability, and long-term energy cost. It is the framework through which Bermuda's energy transitions is planned, sequenced, and costed. A sound IRP is the difference between a transition that lowers bills and one that raises them. Successive governments have made promises to the people of Bermuda about their energy future. In 2015, the National Electricity Sector Policy set a target of 38 cents per renewable generation by 2035 and laid the foundation for the Electricity Act 2016. In 2019, the Regulatory Authority approved the IRP that charted an accelerated course towards approximately 85% renewable generation by 2035. In the 2021 speech from the throne, the government committed to regulations addressing the cost of the fuel surge for electricity and to legislation enable renewable energy developers to test their technologies in Bermuda. In the 2023 speech from the throne, delivered weeks after a 20% increase in electricity fees, the government committed to advance amendments to the regulatory legislation and the Electricity Act 2016 to provide for greater public protection in pricing, determination, and implementation. And in the 2025 speech from the throne, the government committed to limit the categories of recoverable expenses that may be passed on to the consumer, to empower the regulatory authority to implement fairer pricing on retail electricity tariffs, and to review the requirement for a mandatory connection to the grid. Madam President, it is accepted that there has been no comprehensive refresh of the National Electricity Sector Policy since 2015. Because this is accepted, it is meant that determination that is always the right time to set a path on track. This year, the government advanced that work. The National Electricity Sector Policy 2026 now states clearly and publicly the policy position on the electricity sector: affordability, equality, reliability, and least cost planning. The question before this House, as presented in this amendment, is whether the current planning machinery of the sector can deliver that policy. The promise of 2021, of 2023, and of 2025 cannot be made true through the current IRP process built on the assumption of another era and misaligned with the policy of the elected government. Madam President, honorable members may ask, why have we been unable to deliver? Part of the answer lies in the architecture itself. Under the current framework, the IRP is authorized by the utility. The utility is a commercial enterprise. It answers lawfully to its shareholders and it plans accordingly to its commercial interests. The regulatory authority then refines what the utility submits. And the government, which promised the people relief and a better standard of living, holds the responsibility without the statutory means. 3 entities, 3 different objectives, 1 bill at the end of the month, paid by the Bermudian household. It should be declared that none of these institutions has acted improperly. The structure itself produces the misalignment, and this bill begins to correct it by ensuring regulatory accountability to the public interest. Madam President, honorable members should also understand what this planning machinery costs the people it serves. The regulatory authority is funded by regulatory fees covered from this sector, and its in published budget states that the fees paid by the utility are recoverable from the electricity ratepayers. For the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year, the authority's public electricity budget stands at approximately $4.5 million, an increase of 52% on the prior year, with nearly $1.6 million allocated to consulting services in support of work that includes the development of the IRP. The regulatory fee charged on every kilowatt hour sold has risen from 0.545 cents to 0.855 cents, and the utility may recover it through a dedicated charge on the bill. On the other side, the ledger, the utilities earned costs for prepping the IRP proposed included external consultants and modeling, sit within the regulatory course based on which tariffs are built, Every dollar of planning on both sides is ultimately a ratepayer dollar. The analysis underpinning the first IRP estimate that a 2-year delay in needed generations would have cost ratepayers some $87.8 million in temporary power alone. A poorly constructed plan locks in generations' choices, fuel exposure, and capital commitments for decades, and every misjudgment is paid for month after month on the household bill. Madam President, now consider the time Bermuda's first IRP moved from the utilities proposed in February 2018 to an approved plan in 2019, a cycle roughly 18 months. The current cycle tells a different story. The regulatory authority requested a proposal for the utility in October 2022. The deadline for the proposal was extended with ministerial consent to November 2023. The proposal arrived in May 2024. Public consultation was still being extended in September 2025. When the minister was appointed to this office in February 2025, more than 2 years into the cycle, there was no approved plan, and there is none today. This bill is not a sudden shift. It addresses a process that was already delayed, already out of date, and already detached from the promises successive governments made to the people of this country. Madam President, without a pause, this government is denied the means to deliver on its promises. That is the operational truth, and this bill resolves it. Some have suggested that more money should be spent to finalize the current IRP. The argument has been weighed and rejected. Spending further resources to complete a plan that is misaligned with the government's stated policy and that runs contrary to affordability does not serve the public interest. Good money should follow good planning. The responsible course is to pause, to reconstitute the process correctly, and to plan once, properly in the public interest. Accordingly, Madam President, the bill will make the following amendments. Number 1, it will define the Integrated Resources Planning Process, or IRP process, as the process by which an integrated resource plan is requested, submitted, and considered for approval under the Electricity Act 2016. Number 2, it will insert a new public interest power enabling the minister, after consultation and where the statutory test is met, to make an order for the suspension and reconstitution of all or part of the IRP process. Number 3, it will require the regulatory authority and the transmission, distribution, and retail licensee to consider consumer affordability in the integrated resource planning and decision making, and to ensure that affordability protections form a integral part of the integrated resource plan. Number 4, it will provide for the resumption and approval of an integrated resource plan following any suspension and reconstitution of the IRP process. Number 5, it will amend the Regulatory Authority Act 2011 to recognize that the minister may have public interest powers in respect of a regulated industry sector where these powers are specified in the Act or in statutory legislation. Madam President, Part 8A allows the minister, after consulting the regulatory authority and the TD&R licensee, to make an order to suspend and reconstitute any part of the IRP process, but only where the statutory test is met. That test requires the minister to be satisfied that continuing the IRP process would pose a risk to the reliability, sustainability, or affordability of the energy supply, or that action is necessary to ensure consistency between the government policy and the proposed IRP. The minister must also be of the opinion that continuing the process will be contrary to the public interest. Madam President, because this power is significant, the bill includes important safeguards. An IRP suspension order must state the reason for the order, the period of suspension, the part or parts of the IRP process that may be reconstituted, and any directions necessary for the regulatory authority to give effective to the order. To give effect to the order. The order will be subjected to negative resolution procedure, and the period of suspension cannot exceed 2 years. The bill will also ensure continuity. The integrated resource plan already in operations will remain in effect until another IRP is approved and published. This avoids uncertainty and ensures that Bermuda's electricity planning framework continues to operate during the period of review. Before the suspension period expires, the regulatory authority must issue a notice setting out when the IRP process will resume, which parts of the process have been reconstituted, the next steps to be taken, and any guidance relating to resumption. The bill also provides a right of appeal to the Supreme Court for the TDNR licensee or any other person aggrieved by the making of an IRP suspension order. Madam President, some will call this statutory ministerial interference, but this bill actually builds clear national policy, a cohesive planning process answerable to the policy, a legislative framework that defines the specific circumstances in which a minister may act, good governance in not the absence of material responsibility. It is the responsibility exercised through law in the open within limits set by the honorable legislator. A ministerial directive on affordability issued last year was not material enough to reduce regulatory operations. This power is tailored to its purpose. It applies to one process only, the IRP process as defined in the Act. It may be exercised only after consultation with the regulatory authority and the TDNR licensee. It may be exercised only where the statutory test is met. A risk to the reliability, sustainability, or affordability of the energy supply, or the inconsistency between government policy and the proposed plan. And in either case, the minister must be of the opinion that continuing the process will be contrary to the public interest. Every order must state its reason, its duration, and the parts of the process affected. No suspension may exceed 2 years. Every order is subjected to the negative resolution procedure of this honorable legislator. The IRP is in operation, remains in effect throughout. The regulatory authority must publish a notice before the process resumes. Any aggrieved person may appeal to the Supreme Court. Let me also be precise about what this bill does not do. It does not broaden the minister's general powers of direction under the Electricity Act 2016. These provisions stand as Parliament wrote them. This bill creates one narrow, purpose-built mechanism for the one defined circumstance and nothing more. And let the record state a further fact. No businesses or enterprise is economically throttled by it. No investment sits frozen on its account. What is at stake is simpler and larger. Whether the government or Bermuda possesses the appropriate mechanisms to deliver what it promises to the people who elect it. Madam President, the bill right-sizes the planning process. It is tabled because of today's circumstances, but it is built to outlast them. It will be available to this administration and to further administrations and future administrations that carry a mandate from the Bermudian people, so that the elected government of the day can steer the energy sector in the public interest. That is how democracy should govern its essential services. Madam President, from the commencement of this act, the pace and the direction of Bermuda's energy transition will no longer be advanced by any single entity. The transition will evolve in alignment with the policies of the government the people choose. It will consider and include all people. The households installing rooftop solar, the renter who depends entirely on the grid, the senior on a fixed income, and the small business watching its operational cost. Their interests expressed through the democratic mandate will set the standard against which every plan is tested: affordability, reliability, and fairness. Madam President, this bill opens the next phase of Bermuda's energy reform. In the months ahead, the government will continue consultation on amendments that strengthen the regulatory ability to ensure fair retail electricity pricing and greater accountability within the sector. This includes reviewing the categories of costs and expenses that may properly be passed on to the consumer, and ensuring the inefficiency and imprudent expenditure cannot simply become a burden carried by Bermudian ratepayers. The people of Bermuda expect a system that rewards efficiency, innovation, and responsible planning. They should never bear unnecessary costs without scrutiny. Madam President, the government will also improve coordination between the Department of Energy, the Department of Planning, and the Regulatory Authority so that Bermuda can properly forecast, monitor, and manage the growth of distributed generations across the island while protecting grid stability, system reliability, and consumer affordability. Bermudians are already investing in rooftop solar, battery storage, and cleaner technologies on our regulatory system must evolve with them. Madam President, the government further intends to explore amendments related to feed-in tariffs and mechanisms that provide greater certainty and fairness for those investing in renewable energy technologies, and to continue reviewing the mandatory utility connection framework so that a more diverse energy future can be examined responsibly. Policy certainly must form a part of encouraging cleaner energy adoption. Madam President, all of this work will proceed through an all of energy program of stakeholder engagement and development. Household installers, the utility, independent producers, the regulatory authority, environmental organizations, and the business community will each have a seat at the table. The government will weigh every contribution against a single measure, what serves Bermuda and its people. Madam President, the people of Bermuda expect an electricity system that is sustainable, a decision-making that is affordable and fair. This government rejects the narrative that Bermuda is too small to modernize its energy system or too limited to pursue greater energy resilience. Affordability and sustainability are connected objectives, and every reform we advance is rooted in one principle. Bermuda's energy future must serve the people of Bermuda first. Madam President, brick by brick, reform by reform, this government is building a modern energy framework that is more accountable, more sustainable, more consumer focused, and more resilient to the global pressures that increasingly test islands nations. This work will take time, and the direction is clear. We are building an energy future that Bermuda's next generation can inherit with confidence. This bill is a practical and necessary step in that work. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons, Junior Minister for Home Affairs. And before I open the floor for senators to respond to this bill, I would just like to acknowledge and welcome the Honorable Alexa Lightburn, the Minister of Home Affairs, as well as Mr. Adrian Hall, the Director of Energy, who are both in the gallery. Welcome to you both. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to the Junior Minister. I thought that was going to be a lot longer of a brief given the size of her file, but thankfully not. But just to declare that the opposition, we in the opposition, me and myself and my colleagues, oppose this bill, not because we disagree with the goal of lower fairer electricity costs for every Bermudian, which I think we share that with government members on the other side of the aisle. But because we believe that this legislation chooses the wrong mechanism to achieve that goal, and ultimately could potentially make things worse, not better, for the ratepayer. This bill seeks to give the minister power to suspend the integrated, I've been talking about the IRP, integrated resource planning process, the IRP, and this is the technical framework through which Bermuda's long-term energy future is being planned. This suspension could be up to 2 years. And ultimately, it could reconsider deadlines or obligations that have already been set. And we believe these are significant powers for many reasons. One is that the minister can suspend based on public interest, and the public interest is undefined. It has to be, poses a risk to the reliability, sustainability, or affordability. And we believe that these are broad subjective thresholds, and there's no independent verification as to whether that test has been met. We also believe it bypasses the regulatory authority, who are precisely there to provide that independent expert oversight of the electricity sector, and to be insulated from short-term political pressures. And we believe that this bill specifically and quite materially reduces that insulation. Next up, we in the opposition, the One Bermuda Alliance, believe that we have already proposed a fairly good solution, or better solution, and that is on giving the regulatory authority more teeth, or more statutory teeth, to actually enforce affordability protections on its own. We would suggest that we amend the Regulatory Authority Act to give them greater powers to do their job properly. And I believe the government has acknowledged that greater teeth is required. And I will say that if that legislation was coming before this chamber today, we would be supportive of it. Another point to note is that the cost is, the IRP process is expensive. The costs are there whether we suspend it or not. And it potentially could compound those costs because work already done may need to be redone. Technical inputs might become stale, so they might have to be redone with consultants. And I believe, a 2-year delay could have a large hit to our ratepayers. Moreover, I think the power that this gives is not just for the current administration, but it could potentially be for future governments. And obviously, we do not know who ministers may be tomorrow, let alone in the future. And we may have, a well-intentioned minister today with a clear policy output, but we don't know where that's going to be in the future. And I think that's the importance of having the regulatory authority with the independence to create these opportunities. So with that, I have 2 questions. And one is whether the junior minister can confirm whether the minister would intend to issue an IRP suspension order following the passage of this bill, and which parts of the IR process the ministry or minister intends to suspend, and on what basis that public interest test has been satisfied. And secondly, has the Attorney General's chambers or any other independent legal advisor assessed the litigation risk arising from a suspension order, and will that assessment be made available? I think, in closing, we all want the same destination of affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity for every household and business on our island, but we disagree that this is the right way to go, and the minister should not be able to suspend the current IRP process. We believe that an independent body should be in charge, and that is exactly what the regulatory authority is there to do. If they bring that to the Senate, we will support it. But as it stands, we will not. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Tannock, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I noted that Senator Simmons mentioned that public interest requires the suspension of IRP. Can the senator specify what public interest has been demonstrated to require the suspension of an IRP? That's my first question. My second is, if the government proposes to suspend IRPs, and for the listening public, IRPs are strategic blueprints that basically outline how a country will manage its energy, right? Future energy goals, energy cost. So if the government is suggesting that IRPs are suspended and can be suspended, what will the government be producing to fill that vacuum to demonstrate how whatever their suspension is meeting those needs. And who will be preparing that? And then my third one is the regulatory body, the regulatory authority also states that their remit is to ensure that energy development and consumption in Bermuda is done with the public interest in mind, and they have fairness, transparency, accountability, all of these things that they use for the public interest. We already have a body that says it's working in the public interest. Is it the government's opinion that the regulatory authority is not sufficiently acting in the public interest or at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tanner. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Senator David Rogers, you have the floor.
Good day, Bermuda. So I'm not in support in adding more powers to the minister's already considerable powers, mainly because of I have a little bit of a trust issue. Well, I'm actually saddened to see this bill brought here today because I know the individuals on the other side of the aisle actually have a commitment to democracy and separation of powers. But what this bill would essentially do is detooth the RA. What's the point of having experts? What's the point of having expertise? What's the point of having technical officers if we have the ability to undermine them when they're
Point of order, Madam President.
Yes.
My colleague is perhaps unintentionally
problem.
misleading the House. The amendment to the bill does not remove the technical implementation authority of the regulatory authority. It only provides the minister with the ability to set policy direction.
Right. It could be interpreted a
Senator.
number of ways, I believe. So what's the point of having the technical consideration when we have the ability to undercut them, right? So that is one of the reasons why I cite mistrust. We've seen an example of that today. For example, the RA's annual report is only now being tabled from 2020. From 2020. The government has taken a reporting is optional approach in many of its ministries. I can cite in health, we have the hospital is at least 3 years behind on their annual reporting. You have the, the premier has promised a report on individuals who work, consultants who work with, there was a report
Point of
in
order,
fact-
Madam President. That's
Yes. Senator Simmons, what's
that
your
has
point of
nothing
order?
to do with the bill that I'm talking about today.
Senator Simmons, I don't believe that's a point of order, but I will take the.
Yes, you need to address
Yes.
the action.
So, but I'm pointing to the reason why I have a distrust. So, with its optional reporting optional approach, I believe the quote was, "The premier has tasked the government to work for the people, not to produce historical reports," and that was said in the House in the last session. So I can't believe that the senators, especially the AG, as the chief law enforcement officer, would be okay with a government that makes laws and is not bound by the law, right? This sets a dangerous precedent, allowing a well-intentioned minister who thinks they're doing the right thing to undercut their technical officers.
Point of
The
order,
negative resolution.
Madam President.
Senator Simmons, what is your point of order?
The regulatory authority and its reporting process is based on the Auditor General. The minister is not part or connected to the pace in which the Auditor General and its hard-working staff complete their audit. That has nothing to do with the minister. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you for
But
your point
I
of
believe the
clarification.
minister would acknowledge that the minister, I believe senator would acknowledge that the minister has the ability to change the direction of what the technical officers have stated, right? So that makes my argument complete. So, for my question,
Point of order, Madam President, is misleading the House.
that is not misleading.
It
the
is,
House.
Madam President.
I believe
Senator,
This is becoming just points
No,
of
Senator Rogers,
interruption.
will you move on? You said you had
Yeah,
an
yeah, yeah, I
additional.
have my
That
question.
is not,
Thank you so much, Madam President. I
the
appreciate
issue
that.
has been addressed.
So, I would like the senator to provide a situation where the minister can she provide me with a hypothetical in how the minister would use their power. For example, when would it trigger? How would the process of using those powers be? And then for my next question, there will be costs associated with circumventing the IRP process, right? What do those costs look like? How will the government make the facilities whole? How will they calculate the costs associated with undermining one of these processes? Thank you.
Senator Misha Fabula, first of all, you indicated you want to speak on this bill. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And while this is not one of the several hats that I wear as junior minister, I felt compelled to add my contribution in support of the bill, just to, in the interest of declaring my own interests. I spent half a decade working for Ascending Group Limited and then Liberty Utilities, the parent company of the monopoly transmission, distribution, and retail entity, who is being affected by this proposed amendment. In part, I wanted to declare that, given in the public domain, we saw in the Daily today, the president of Liberty Utilities speak out in opposition alongside my colleagues regarding the proposed amendment. And I guess kind of in general, I usually take pause or at least apply a little more scrutiny, and I encourage the public to do the same when someone who is regulated is speaking out in opposition to changes in the regulation that affect them, especially when the stated aim of the change is to enhance affordability of electricity, an essential service that many in the public, those my colleagues say they've canvassed recently as well. I'm sure they also speak to the challenges with paying their BELCO bills. In fact, I think some of my colleagues mentioned that. And so just to reiterate Senator Simmons' briefing there, the bill does two things. Right? It makes consumer affordability a legal duty instead of an aspiration within the IRP. And also, it is giving a time-limited, consultative, and reviewable mechanism to realign the energy plan with the policy Bermudians elected the government to deliver. Both are formal features of modern energy governance. And Senator Simmons has already handily described why this change is needed. But as is my normal kind of style in these types of debates, I wanted to look at what some of our peers and other jurisdictions are doing in this space. It's been quite everyone so far from the opposition and the independents have spoken in strong. I'm sorry, apologies, I can't recall exactly Senator Tannock's position on it, but the opposition started with they are opposed, and so without having claims of misleading the House, here we go. The kind of ruling nation, right, where we are an overseas territory of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom's Energy Act 2013 strategy and policy statement allows the government to set strategic priorities of the independent regulator. The system operator must have regard to them and carry out functions best calculated to further the government's policy outcomes. It's been enforced since May the 1st of 2024. Moving a little bit closer to home, but still another member of the Commonwealth, we have Canada, and in Ontario, the Electricity Act of 1998, more specifically Section 25.32, gives the Minister of Energy a standing statutory power to direct the independent electricity system operator on procurement, which is the purchasing of the generation equipment, which is a part of how we determine the energy mix, is what we've been talking about today in this bill's amendment. And the Ontario also publishes a top-down integrated energy plan, and it's led by the minister. And another jurisdiction that is kind of leaning quite heavily into renewables, California, has a Bill 350, a public utility code. The legislature there sets binding targets, and the regulator runs the IRP to meet state policy goals via the loading order.
Point of information, quick.
Just to
I just have a question.
Sure, I'm feeling charitable. Let's have
Yes, all right, he's,
No, I just have a question. Does what you just
point
No,
point
it's
of
not a-
clarification
no,
would
point
be
of clarification?
Sure.
Does that? Are you saying these are not in our current legislation now? Are you saying this is will be added via this bill? I'm just trying to get the point of why you're citing.
Madam President, if I'm given the liberty of completing my submission, I would expand on the point I'm trying to make by pointing at parallels where the executive level of government has direct involvement in setting the strategy and having control over the regulator's approach to planning energy for various jurisdictions. And taking it a little bit closer to home, maybe even more comparable island being Cayman, the government via the Ministry and Energy Policy Council sets their national energy policy. Their most recent one is 2024-25. And again, the government has direct involvement in setting that strategy. And some of the points being raised, this whole thing about it's subverting the regulator. The RA keeps its technical independent role in running and approving the IRP. The bill governs when the process can be realigned to elected policy. Right, like just hypothetical, as my colleague was looking for, in theory, if the OBA were the government and they ran on a campaign pledging to bring down the price of electricity, if the legislation that controls that process did not allow them to do that, how would that be democratic? I question this, the technocracy of a regulator, first is not jeopardized by this change, but also is less democratic by having the person who was elected to government to represent the people being unable to apply specific direction in this specific process. Let's also keep in mind that this is not wholesale change to the relationship between the RA and the ministry. And so in closing, given those kinds of examples that I highlighted briefly there, do my colleagues across the floor accept that the UK, Ontario, Cayman, and Jamaica, who I didn't give details of, but they also have this relationship between the ministry setting direction for the IRP that their regulator then implements. Do we say that we accept that those other elected officials, those governments have similar direction? And if so, what specifically makes Bermuda's more narrow, right? Like we're specific to only the IRP process and adding time bounding to the suspension and reconstitution timeline. What exactly in there is objectionable? And also, I do submit that I submit this argument that the government policy direction of the IRP is the safeguard. We are much more accountable to the people of Bermuda, maybe slightly less so us here in the Senate as we are all appointed, but definitely so in cabinet, and the government of the day answers to the people of Bermuda, whereas the regulatory authority is hired employees. And also I mentioned in my kind of register of interest in this debate, I also wanted to highlight kind of that relationship. One of the themes that has been running through the utilities communications with the public is this strong desire for liquid natural gas, LNG, as it were, in the generation mix. And I encourage the public to do their own research in that regard. Algonquin Power and Utilities Corporation, AQN, as they trade on the New York Stock Exchange, has a considerable interest in LNG, and I question kind of the influence that has on the regulated entity's submission that kind of kicks off the whole IRP process, bringing this back to the beginning, right? Like having the person who's regulated say, hey, okay, here's what's going to be the plan, regulator, what do you think? Maybe that process itself should be re-examined as well. And on that note, Madam President, I do yield. Thank you.
thank you, Senator Misha Fabula. Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Rogers, you have an additional
Yeah.
comment?
So understanding what was communicated.
Point of clarification.
Yes, Senator Fabula.
Sorry, Madam President, my understanding of the general debate of bills is that each person is able to contribute a single time. We're not
Yes.
in committee.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Would any other senator care to speak on this bill? Minister Wilkerson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you to colleagues for their questions. I will start by addressing, I think, the two comments that were specifically directed to me. One related to litigation risk, and the other related to generally whether the Attorney General was in approval of, if I believe that's, if I understood Senator Rogers correctly, whether I was in approval of this piece of legislation. I'll start with the second question, Madam President, if I might. Just for the members of the public and also for the senator's edification. Before a bill is tabled, there are very many rounds of consideration within the Attorney General's chambers. So apart from the robust discussions that will take place at the cabinet table in the drafting phases. So to answer that question, yes, I've sat with our drafting team, with our civil advisory team on the fitness of this piece of legislation. So it is no issue. It's tabled because I support it, Madam President. So that's taking care of that. In relation to the specific question around have litigation risk been examined from a suspension order, I heard this debate in another place as well. If we were the kind of government that did not do the right thing for the people because we were concerned that an interested party who is benefiting might use the benefit of the court system to sue the government, we would not be able to make changes for the benefit of the people. And there's a general question around about what constitutes a public interest, right? So these actions are in the public interest. We cannot, Madam President, we're here, the OBA Senate leader saying that the OBA is in support of affordability measures, but just not this one, right? We cannot have it both ways, right? Because when I open my electricity bill, I'm interested in a solution. And I believe many of the people who are in the listening audience right now are interested in that as well. So that is to say, there has to always be a balance to be had. And so I want to just take a little bit of time to walk through some of the current law and what's in the proposed legislation. Because there was also a comment that the minister currently has considerable powers. If the minister already had considerable powers, we would not be here debating this piece of legislation this afternoon, Madam President. The reason that we are here debating it is because the minister's powers in this regard are indeed limited. And I want to make sure, I'm going to re-emphasize a point that Senator Simmons made, that the powers sought in this piece of legislation are limited just to the IRP. So the idea that there is a potential for ministerial overreach in all other kinds of areas is unfounded. This piece of legislation has been very, very carefully granted to ensure, carefully drafted, to ensure that the grant to the minister is limited to her intervention in relation to the IRP. Now, there was a question around, really, are we unhappy with the RA's remit because they have the power to do all of these things? Well, clearly, it's already been stated that the RA could use more teeth. But the fact is, based on the powers that it does have with its current legislation, their abilities are not matching the action, right? And so this is not a slight on the RA, very capable people, and they do a great job. But there are some legislative stops in how the process is structured. And this is what we're seeking to cure in this go-round. So, Madam President, if you'll permit me, I'll just take a little bit of time to walk through what the current law is and what is proposed so that we can match it up adequately. And I believe that was an ask. So currently, there is no power to pause or even realign the plan once the licensee, Belco, has submitted it and it sits with the authority for approval. We do know that some of the proposed items, for example, my colleague has given me a really handy chart. We know that members in this chamber and average Bermudians are very interested in Bermuda going toward a greener economy, right? That our efforts toward renewable energy is something that no one disagrees about. And the questions are, how are we going to get there, right? So we have a current plan which would have us looking at a goal for renewable electricity by 2035. That we should be 85% toward that goal by 2035. And we've heard, I mean, I've done my part. I've got an electric car. Matter of fact, I have a government electric car. I have a personal, I have an electric car. I was invested in, doing my part. We all do our things. But even with that, Madam President, and members of the listening public, with a target to become, have renewable energy by 2035, 85%, the question is, where are we today? We are 9% toward that goal in 2025. On 2025 measures, we are only 9% along the way to an 85% goal. And the question becomes, are we really going to get there the way that we are going? And projecting ahead, in order to get there, there would need to be some substantial changes within the context of the current IRP, right? And investments where we argue that those costs will be offloaded to the taxpayer, to the ratepayer, to you and me, to the members of the listening public, all of us who turn on our lights, right? So we have to have the ability to, I think there's been a lot of focus on the pause. It's the pause in order to realign. It's not a pause for no reason. The capable minister is not saying, I want to have the ability to put my finger in and stop the plan just to stop it. Her ambition is to stop it for a reason. And we believe that these changes are sound. I heard a comment that there was some distrust, not necessarily distrust in this minister, but in a process by which a new minister could come along and change the tide, right? And I think this is why this is one of the safest ways to go, to give the minister this power to pause, to realign the IRP. The goal would be that we have a new one that anticipates and includes modern technologies, right, that will help us to get to the goals we all agree that we'd like to have in terms of renewable energy and a greener Bermuda. On top of that, Madam President, the key thing is that affordability as a mandate is difficult to accomplish in the current context. And so sometimes, again, about the litigation risk, yeah, the fact that somebody might sue you is never a good reason not to do the right thing. That is never a good reason not to do the thing that will be in the public interest. And that is what this government is attempting to do by moving this along, Madam President. Just on the plan itself, right? The current IRP has been in development since 2019. We're now in 2026, and it is effectively not operational. So we've run far past, right, that without a truly approved plan. I've already talked about the fact that, renewable energy penetration is still very low. We know that technology is moving faster than the speed of light. I would believe that Bermudians would want to know, right, that we have the ability to bring the licensee in collaboration, right, to help to build a plan that encompasses the best and forward-looking technology as we think about what our overriding resource plan should be for the future. And under the current regime, no innovative type of license has been granted. So the law carries a power to license the testing of new energy technology since 2023, but no innovative licensee has been awarded. Right? So we have an instrument that could do it, but it remains underutilized. There has been, in another place, and a suggestion here today, the idea of the override of interference, right? I want to just address that specifically. What is contemplated in this piece of legislation in front of us this afternoon, Madam President, is that the new power, I've already said that is limited, the minister, only to the IRP. But that power permits her to give directions only as necessary to give effect to a public interest order. It is required, I mentioned a little while ago, to be consultative. So the minister must, not may, not if she feels like it, she must consult this minister or any other minister, must consult the authority, that's the regulatory authority, and the TDNR licensee, Valco, before acting. And it is reviewable. So the TDR licensee or any aggrieved person may appeal to the Supreme Court, right? And that's not necessarily suing the government. And typically with the plans, in Madam President, full disclosure, I previously sat on the board of a telecommunications company, and market reviews and challenges to the court are a matter of course, all right? But general directions, only general directions, are preserved for ordinary ministerial direction. So that is to say, Madam President, and members of the listening public, it is not interference. It is a very limited power to write a plan that is not accomplishing so far what needs to be accomplished for the people of Bermuda or for the licensee or the RA. And this is what this seeks to do at this time, Madam President. So I will pause with my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam AG, Minister of Justice, for your overview and comments. Senator Lindsay Simmons, you have the floor.
Madam President, I thank honorable senators for their contribution and for the questions raised in this debate. I will respond to these concerns directly, and I will be clear about what these amendments do and what they don't do. Madam President, every household and business in Bermuda depends on reliable and affordable electricity. Decisions about our energy future affect the monthly bills paid by families, the operating costs faced by businesses, and the overall competitiveness of our economy. These amendments do not weaken the independent role of the regulatory authority. The integrated resource plan remains in place, and technical and engineering decisions remain with those who have the expertise to make them. What has changed is the recognition that decisions about Bermuda's energy future do not exist in a vacuum, and as Senator Tannock notes, the IRP should lead the way for our energy future. How can it lead based on a 2015 policy? That would be walking backwards. The world has changed. They have real consequences for the people that pay bills. I invite my Senate colleagues to better understand our energy landscape and the risks that currently exist within. When the decisions affect every electricity customer, it is responsible and necessary that the elected government ensures that the broader public interest is considered. The people of Bermuda elected government to safeguard their interests, particularly when critical services are involved. Madam President, these amendments ensure that Bermuda's energy future is shaped not only by technical consideration, but also by an understanding of affordability, reliability, and a national impact. At the same time, the legislation actually strengthens the long-term planning framework for the electricity sector. It places the IRP firmly in the public domain. It reinforces the independence of the regulator. It opens the process to a wider community, including businesses, households, and the sections that depend on reliable power. For too long, the structure of the sector has allowed one entity to play multiple roles in shaping and benefiting the plan. When the body that helps define the plan also brings forward projects for approval, the plan risks losing its purpose as guiding frameworks. These reforms address the imbalance. They restore transparency and accountability. Bermuda already set an ambitious goal in 2019 to reach approximately 85% renewable energy by 2035. Progress has not matched that ambition, and projections indicate continued reliance on fossil fuels in the years ahead. The transition that was promised has not yet been fully realized. International examples show that change is possible. Jurisdictions with similar constraints, such as isolated grids and high energy costs, have expanded renewable energy, increased competition, and delivered savings to consumers. Bermuda's path must be tailored to our own realities, but these examples demonstrate what can be achieved with the right framework. Some have described these changes as interference. In reality, they introduce transparency where it has been lacking, and they ensure that decision-making reflects the interests of the public. The amendments are deliberately narrow. They apply only in defined circumstances in the public interest. They do not give ministers open-ended control, and they do not undermine their regulatory independence. An energy system must serve everyone who depends on it, and everyone depends on it. Reliability is essential. Affordable electricity is essential. A successful transition to cleaner energy is essential. Every stakeholder from household and small businesses to major industries and community organizations has a role in shaping Bermuda's energy future. One island, one energy system, built for everyone. The plan now belongs to the people of Bermuda. Together, we have the opportunity to build an energy future that protects affordability, strengthens reliability, and delivers the transition that our country has long been promised. Madam President, I also want to make it clear that the technical officers under the RA are not under the Minister of Home Affairs remit. And now I would answer your questions. Will the minister intend to suspend the IRP process, and what public interest has been assessed? The electricity sector policy is outlined of alignment with the policy directed of today. The IRP is referencing and using an outdated 2015 electricity policy to set future generations. This needs to be addressed. The government has recently finished its consultation on the National Electricity Sector Policy 2026 on May 21st, 2026, and are in the process of finalizing the policy. The AG pretty much answered this question. Has the AG or independent counsel been consulted? Yes, the AG's chamber and independent counsel has been consulted. Stakeholders stated there was no legal objection to the amendment. The RA is done with the public interest in mind. Number 3, the RA is not sufficiently working in the interest of the public. The RA is an independent regulatory. However, they are still accountable to the people and to the government of the day to follow the policy's direction. Therefore, policy and legislation are being provided to address this, instead of issuing ministerial direction, which will be perceived as ministerial interference. Number 4, how does the minister see using these powers? In the current situation, there is a disconnect between the policy and the IRP. It is required to pause the IRP to ensure the policy is updated, and in turn ensure the IRP takes this update policy into consideration. And I've answered all the questions, Madam President.
And it's left for you to move your bill. Senate. Simmons.
Thank you. Madam President.
Excuse me, Madam President. Can you remind me of the protocol? Do we get a chance to have a follow-up question from Senator Simmons's responses?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled Electricity Amendment Act 2026 be now read a second time.
Is there any objection to the second reading? No objection.
Madam President, I move that Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Electricity Amendment Act 2026 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to that motion? We have 3 objections, so we will take a vote. Beg your pardon? Well, there are 3, so you're going to take a... When there is 3 objections, we have to take a vote. So where's Minister Caesar? All right. Well, there's 3, so we have to, yeah. Senators, for your information, on the third reading, if we have 3 objections, then we do have to take a vote.
Senators, it has been moved for the third reading of the Electricity Amendment Act 2026. If you are in agreement with the motion, say aye. If you are against, say nay. Senator Cunningham.
The motion again.
Senator Simmons moved for the third reading. So if you are in agreement with the motion, say aye. If you are against the third reading, say nay.
No.
We have to carry this over for the next day of meeting because we made a mistake the last time. If-
All right, Senator Cunningham.
Nay.
Senator Rogers.
Nay.
Senator Smith.
Nay.
Senator Bell.
Aye.
Minister Caesar.
Aye.
Senator Fubler.
Aye.
Senator Simmons.
Aye.
Minister Wilkerson.
Aye.
Senator Tannock.
Aye.
Senator White is absent. Madam President.
Nay.
With a vote of 6 ayes to 4 nays, the motion carries.
So Senator, Mr. Reed?
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill do not pass.
It has been moved that the bill do not pass. And therefore, are there any objections? You have the 3 again. We took a vote on the motion, and now we're taking a vote on the passage of the bill. Sorry. This vote is going to be on the passage, the actual passage of the bill.
It has been moved that the Electricity Amendment Act 2026 do now pass. If you are in agreement with the passage of the bill, say aye. If you are against, say nay. Senator Cunningham.
Nay.
Senator Rogers.
Nay.
Senator Smith.
Nay.
Senator Bell.
Aye.
Minister Caesar.
Aye.
Senator Fubler.
Aye.
Senator Simmons.
Aye.
Minister Wilkerson.
Aye.
Senator Tannock.
Nay.
John White is absent. Madam President. With a vote of 6 ayes to 4 nays, the bill is passed.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senators. The bill is passed, and we will now move on with our orders of the day, and that is the next item on, oh, sorry, because of the time, I think we need to break for lunch. Really? Sorry.
Yes, 12:44.
The vote was 6, they didn't hear the vote.
Madam President voted nay.
No, not for, I didn't vote no, I voted for yes for the passage of the bill.
Yeah.
So it was 6-2.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong paper.
She's looking at the wrong one.
The wrong paper, sorry. We Madam President voted for the passage of the bill, so it was 6.
It was 6-4. I voted for the passage of the bill. Senators, it is now 12:45. I'm recommending that we break for lunch, and we will return at 2:15. Sorry.
Sorry, Madam President. I'd like to propose a motion that we continue through because I believe we are at the end of business.
That's why I was suggesting that we go through.
It's a motion.
Senators, the motion is that we continue and not break for lunch. The senators are in agreement? Sorry, Senator Tannock?
So just for clarity, are we, so that would be 4,
Bill
5?
was passed.
No. So that would be, thank you,
Lunch,
thank you,
you're
Madam.
talking about lunch? I'm sorry.
I would like to be talking about lunch, but I'm talking about tourism investment, agreed purchase of Compass Point, and then just, so are we're going to go through those now? We're going to,
Yeah, we're going to continue with our orders of the,
okay, all right, okay. Well, okay, Senator Fubler, can you be brief?
Madam President, I move that a motion to suspend Rule 35.
Senators, what has happened is that, let me just read out the procedure on the third reading, because it doesn't happen often, and when it does, it creates an issue for us. So I just want to read the procedure on the third reading. A bill having passed through the Committee of the Whole Senate, or by leave of the Senate, having been read a second time without referral to the Committee of the Whole Senate, may forthwith be read a third time and passed unless at least 3 members object to the motion for the third reading, in which case the third reading shall be deferred to the next day of meeting. However, as Senator Lindsey Simmons has noted, there can be an objection to suspend. So this is an issue that always.
I just want a point of information that 3 members objected. It should have happened, and now you're calling for suspension. The process would have been that we should have followed this as
Point of-
we did
point of-
enact in March.
Yeah, but point of order or point of information, Madam President. Okay, you're correcting the ruling, and I have the right to put a motion on the floor to suspend Rule 35, regardless where we are now. I still have the right to put the motion on the floor
Yes, that is correct.
because I would have been able to do it when you all objected.
But it's my understanding that it's in the notes that 3 members objected to the third reading already.
Point of
So-
information, yes, and she read on to say, however, and even before she said however, I put a motion on the floor to suspend Rule 35, which is in the rules. So I put a motion to
To suspend
suspend Rule
35.
35.
And once the suspension of Rule 35 occurs, then we can proceed. So what are we going to do now?
Is it more than 3 or 3 or more?
Unless, for Rule 35, unless the senator objects and she has.
Well, I mean,
When is the time to suspend Rule 35?
point of order, Madam President. You've made a ruling, a mistake happened. Regardless, we would have made we would have suspended it then. We went forward, the motion with the bill passed, now we're going backwards, so I still have the right to
I understand your
remove the,
statement, but can we get some clarification from the speaker? I've asked a question. I'd like her to answer that first, please. Thank you so much.
point of order, Madam President. Yeah, I ruled on it twice.
This happens, and honestly, I'm ready to go.
It has been moved to suspend Standing Order 35 in relation to the Electricity Amendment Act 2026. If you are in support of the suspension of Standing Order 35, say aye. If you are against, say nay. Senator Cunningham.
Nay.
Senator Rogers.
Nay.
Oops, sorry. Senator Smith is not in the chamber. Senator Bell.
Aye.
Minister Caesar.
Aye.
Senator Fubler.
Aye.
Senator Simmons.
Aye.
Minister Wilkerson.
Aye.
Senator Tannock.
Nay.
Senator White is absent. Madam President. With a vote of 6 ayes to 3 nays, the motion to suspend 35 is carried.
And the
Madam
bill-
President, do I read the third reading again?
Yes.
I mean, the
do-
passage of the bill.
Passage of the bill.
Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Electricity Act 2026 do now pass.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill, no objection, the bill is passed. Thank you, Senators.
Thank you, Madam
And
President.
to move on with the agenda.
So we're carrying.
We are going to
Madam President, I did put a motion on the floor that we
Carry on.
carry on, but now that we have had this delay, I believe members are having a competition with their bellies right now. So
we
I
will break
appreciate
for
that.
lunch,
Thank
and
you.
we will resume at 2:15.
Madam President, just for clarity, because Senator Tannock said that I didn't say it correctly. I said the Electricity Amendment Act 2026 do not pass, just for clarity.